beginning of the last episode, I noted that we would create this card using a traditional naming convention. So in this case, you can see we created a card component. And now each of the child elements or tags that we needed to style would be extensions of that component name. So card, and then card left, or card title, or card excerpt. This is perfectly fine. In your projects, maybe if you're using Sass, you could even extract all of this to a partial named card, and then you would import that. That way, if you ever need to tweak your card styling, you would go to that one file. And it's about as clean and tidy an approach as you can take using that convention. Another option is to use utilities for everything, as much as you possibly can. The only downside to that is you have to create a bunch of utility classes, or you can use dedicated frameworks. One that I really love is called Tailwind. Let's take a look at how to use this. Now you'll notice you can reference it on a CDN or install it through NPM. So if you use something like Laravel Mix, very, very easy. In fact, if you go to your webpack.mix file, there's even a plugin you can pull in so you can call .tailwind and you're all set to go. But we don't want to touch Webpack or Mix in this series. So we lose a little bit of the benefit, but we'll pull it in through a CDN to keep it simple. All right, so let's come back to the top. We can get rid of normalize.css since Tailwind offers that out of the box, and we'll paste that in. So if we come back and give this a refresh, a few things have changed. We'll need to tweak a little bit of the spacing, but no big problem there. And in fact, we can do that right now. So let's find the card title. And maybe line heights were configured properly, so we need to be a little more explicit here. How about 0.5 ems? Then let's make sure we have some breathing room on the card left to compensate. Maybe for card left, padding left of 30 pixels, and then padding right of 30 as well. Come back, give that a refresh, and that's fine. We're not too worried about it. With Tailwind, you'll notice we take a utility approach. For example, if I want to set a text color, well, rather than using a component name, you'll just apply a class of text gray. Let's see what we have for flexbox or flex direction. All right, if we want flex direction column, we use a class name of flex call. Let's do flex display. All right, if I want display flex, I apply a class name of flex. You get the basic idea here. All right, so let's see if we can migrate over to using Tailwind entirely. Let's begin with some low-hanging fruit. You'll see in a number of places we set a display of flex. So let's go to card, and now I'm going to manually apply flex and remove it. So right up here, if I give it a refresh, we get no change. Let's go to card left. You'll see we have display flex there as well. All right, now it's broken. We'll bring it back. So notice we're using utilities to build up our components. And a key thing to understand is you may ultimately decide to extract a dedicated component, and you can still do that with Tailwind. But the key is you begin with utilities rather than beginning by thinking of a name for your component. All right, so now we're back to where we were before. All right, let's just go through this piece by piece. So card right is display flex with a flex direction of column. So if we get rid of that, it's all messed up. We'll fix that. Flex and flex call. Refresh, and we're back to what we had before. What about card left? All right, same thing. So flex direction of column, and then justify content of space between. All right. It's all messed up. Come back to card left, flex call. And now to justify between, we can say justify between. And we're back to where we were. Now it will take a little bit of time to learn the class names. It's mostly going to be a visit to Tailwind, you search for what you need, maybe margin. Here we go, and you can see how to use it. But from personal experience, you learn it amazingly fast. It's not an issue at all. Next, let's talk about the text. So if we go to card right here, we have a color of 888. Now, I almost think of these as magic color values. And that's because, well, somewhere else in your site, will you remember to use that shade of gray? And the answer is probably not. Often with a preprocessor, you'll do things like darken my standard gray by 5%. And then somewhere else, you'll do 4% or 10%. And before you know it, you have literally 200 different versions of gray for your site after 2 years. Now, again, this is a nice thing about frameworks like Tailwind. They give you a base set of colors. That way, you'll never have more than 6 or 7 or 8 different shades of your gray. So let's give that a shot. We'll remove this entirely. All right, this text is all back to black. Now we'll say for card right, we can say the text color is gray. All right, it's a little too light, so let's do gray dark or gray darker. And that looks good to me. Now the nice thing is this follows a convention. So for any color, let's say red, you're going to have lightest all the way up to lighter, light, the main color, and then dark, darker, darkest. So for any shade, you have all of those variants, and those are the only ones you can select. It's no longer on you to always figure out what color it needs to be. You can configure your set red values, and then you reference those as utilities for the rest of the project. Okay, so I think we went with gray darker, and that looks good. What else? I think for the meta section, that also is display flex. So let's fix that. All right, next. So each of the items within it are also flex containers. So now you'll notice before we were just using a generic direct selector there. Let's fix that. Refresh. All right, it's out of alignment. So we'll now say for each of these, flex, and we want to align the items to the center. So if you look that up, the class name is items center. And now we're back to where we were. So you'll notice each time we switch to the utility version of the classes, we can delete more text. So let's do this one as well. The very first div within the card meta has some margin right to give it a little bit of breathing room here. All right, well now I can delete that entirely and we'll just apply it. The convention is M for margin, R for right, and then you have your point values like 2, 3, 4, 6, 8. So let's try 2. There you go. And we're just going to play with it until we get exactly what we need. And that looks fine. All right, so now, yeah, in situations like this, it was a little awkward with our component. We had something like this. We'll grab the first one and set some margin right. Things like that are golden use cases for utility frameworks. That looks good to me. All right, what else? Each image now needs margin right of 8 pixels. We can delete that as well. All right, and we'll fix that. And we'll say for both images, we'll set a class of margin right, maybe 2. Yeah, something like that. Now, what I love about this is piece by piece, we're cleaning up our CSS file. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, and that's because you're ruining your HTML file. This is a very typical, honest reaction to have. My only advice would be give it 10 minutes or so. And I know it's hard because I've been doing this for around 15 years. The first 13 years or so, I was told, and I was under the impression that this is absolutely what you do not do. So it takes a lot of effort to challenge some of your initial thinking. But I hope if you do, if you give it a chance, you might come around. And if not, you can go back to what you had before. Anyhow, let's continue on. Are there any more flex references? Okay, on the body, we are vertically centering it. So let's remove that entirely. It's now at the top left, and we'll apply it manually. We're just going to keep going. Flex, item center, justify, center. Again, if you're thinking, well, how do I know these classes? Just go to the Tailwind docs and you'll learn this stuff very quickly. All right, that's fixed. What next? Now, things like this, you can't always switch to utility classes. Things like this, well, you're going to need this selector to exist. These specific widths and heights, yeah, you're going to need to set that. Now, a border radius you can work with, though. So if I get rid of that, we've lost the edges there. And then where else? On the card left, we had border as well. Okay, we can add those back in. Border 2. So here we want borders, and we want 2 pixels worth. So now you can see the default of gray there. You could even say border red. So you can see how quickly you can scaffold a project. We can say rounded if we want border radius, and there you go. Now in our case, we don't actually want borders, we just want border radius. It's only for a demonstration. So we'll add it there, and then also to card left. There we go. What else? Here, card left and right, we have padding of 20 pixels. Let's see if we can remove that. All right, now on the card left, we have 30 on the left and right. We overwrote that. Okay, we've removed that entirely. Now we'll manually add it back on. P for padding. Now we could say padding right of 4, or padding left, or padding top, or we leave off the direction, and that means padding all around of 4. So once again, you can tinker around to get what you need. So if we tried that, I think that's fairly good. And of course, you can always measure to see exactly how much that applied. In this case, 1.5 rems. All right, what else? Let's keep going. Card left, we're aligning items to the center. All right, let's see. Items to the center. Refresh, there we go. But we want the text centered as well. Text center. Good. What else? Card left, color of white. So if we remove that, they jump back to black. All right. Text is white. All done. All right, so I'm going to keep that background there. Card difficulty, so I want the font size a little bit lower. So here, it's once again large. So we'll fix that down here. Where's our difficulty? There it is. The text should be either normal or large or extra large or 2XL or 3XL or small or extra small. So once again, it's almost like Lego. You have these little building blocks you can use to figure out exactly what you need. Let's try extra small. That looks good. All right, just a little bit more. So the card title, once again, that's almost black. So let's say, right here, text gray darkest. The font size is a little bit larger, and the font weight. Okay, let's try both of those. All right. We'll fix the weight by saying font light. There we go. And then we'll say text, how about 2XL? Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And you know what? I think this should probably be black. There we go. Again, you can tweak this. You can even configure what each of those values represents. So if it turns out if you need a size that isn't yet available, you can just add that in. All right, let's keep going. Card title, margin top of 0. It looks like we don't need that anymore. It was done already. Margin bottom of 0.5 ems. All right, let's get rid of that to give some breathing room here. All right, card title, margin bottom, and we'll try, how about 4? And maybe 3. We'll get what we need there. What else? Right down here, excerpt flex of 1. This is provided out of the box. So it's a flex-1 class. There we go. All right, we'll keep going. Card meta. I'm going to go a little faster. We want to decrease that height. Text small. There we go. Anything else? So let's see what we have. These will be hard-coded. This we can leave hard-coded. This needs to stay. These are unique, so they should stay. Card left, that needs to stay. Now, for things like this, you can create your own classes to set the transparency. How about here? Card skill button. All right, so that adds a line. Now again, if this kind of button is something you will use all over your website, then that's a good use case for creating a button component. So it's not all or none. You'll reach for components when you're dealing with things that are constructed and referenced everywhere on your site. For other things, it's just not necessary. Okay, so we'll come back to our button here. And I can say no underline to remove that. All right, what else? A little bit more. Reduce the font size. All right. For the border radius, let's get rid of that. And now it's back to a rectangle. And we could say rounded or even rounded full. And that'll give us the same thing. All right, what else? Padding. So let's see if we can tweak this a little bit. All right, we've removed all padding. And we can say padding Y on the Y-axis, or top and bottom, of 2. And then on the X-axis of 4. We're just going to play around with this until we get what we need. Yeah, maybe 6 there. Pretty good. All right, a little bit more. For the card title A, yeah, we're going to hide that. So right here. And what else? A color of inherit. Now in this case, I'm not sure if Tailwind offers anything like that. I think that's something that probably should be included, but nonetheless, you can add your own. So here, if we wanted text inherit, or you can even create your own extensions for Tailwind. But yeah, here we could say color inherit. And now I could remove that. Refresh, it's blue. But if we now switch back, text inherit. Now we've created our own utility. So let's see, are we just about done? Yeah, most of this needs to be here. Card skill button could be removed. And then this is a unique background color, so we would keep that as well. So we more or less reproduce the same thing. We might want to tweak some things, like I think this needs to be a little bit wider, like we had before. But nonetheless, we were able to reproduce what we had initially, but now we're using a utility-based approach. So once again, we take a look at our card component. It's now as minimal as possible. Before, it was over 100, 200 lines of CSS. Now we've kept it as simple as possible. And trust me, this kind of CSS will be easier to manage a year from now than the other version, because the other version is going to compound for every single piece of your site, for every single component you create. Now, if I ever need to make a tweak, well, I'm already in the HTML, right? This idea that you can change the layout and the design of your site without touching your HTML, it's a fiction. We all know that. You're going to be in your HTML constantly moving things around, adjusting text and things like that. So with that in mind, this ends up being one of the most natural places to tweak how things should appear. But have no doubt, it takes some time to get used to this and warm up to the idea. So don't immediately write it off. Try it out on a project. At least give it a week or so, and I think you just might like it.